At the Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, among the rows of headstones of the men and women who served in the military, you will find in Section 59, grave number 973, the headstone of Rear Admiral Grace Hopper. Although she is mostly unknown to most of us, her contribution to computer programming revolutionized computer sciences. Her theory and later development of programming languages are still in use today. Grace Brewster Hopper was born on December 9, 1906, in New York City. As a child, she exhibited an early curious nature. At the age of 7, she dismantled several alarm clocks to determine how they worked. As she grew into adulthood, so did her interest in mathematics and the sciences. In 1928, she graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Vassar with a bachelor's degree in mathematics and physics. And in 1930 she earned her master's degree at Yale University, and her PhD in mathematics in 1934. She had begun teaching mathematics at Vassar in 1931, and by 1941 she was promoted to associate professor. The Second World War had officially begun on September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, forcing her English and French allies to declare war against Germany and her allies Italy and Japan. The United States had remained neutral until December 7, 1941, when the Japanese Imperial Navy launched an unprovoked bombing attack on the U.S. naval fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands. The brutal attack destroyed most of the fleet as they sat docked in port, and took the lives of 24,403 U.S. personnel, including U.S. sailors, soldiers, and civilians. The next day, President Franklin Roosevelt and the Congress of the United States declared war on Japan. Not long afterwards, Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States, immersing the nation into the new global conflict. Grace Hopper tried to be commissioned into the Navy early in the war. But at the age 34, she was too old to enlist, and her job as a mathematics professor at Vassar was considered of value to the war effort. She continued to teach at Vassar until 1943, when she obtained a leave of absence from Vassar to be sworn into the United States Navy Reserve as a volunteer member of the Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service, better known as the WAVES. Then, in 1944, she obtained an exemption and was commissioned into the Naval Reserve as a lieutenant, junior grade. She was assigned to the Bureau of Ships Computation Project at Harvard University to work on the Mark I computer project. The Mark I computer was one of the earliest electromechanical computers developed during the war years. It was a massive machine weighing over 9,000 pounds. It was 51 feet long and stood some 8 feet high and only a few inches deep. With over 765,000 components, consisting of relays, switches, rotating shafts, and clutches, along hundreds of miles of wires. It was the first of its kind capable of executing long computations automatically using a binary system that read off punch tape. It was capable of calculations of up to 18 decimal places, and was instrumental in its use to calculate simulations of the implosion factors of the first atomic bomb. Grace Hopper was one of the first programmers of the Mark I. She authored the first manual, titled A Manual of Operation for the Automatic Sequence-Controlled Calculator. After the war, Hopper requested to transfer to the regular Navy, but again her age stood in her way. She decided to remain in the Naval Reserve and remained at Harvard and aided in the development of the Mark II computer. While working on the Mark II, the computer malfunctioned, due to a moth finding its way into a relay. Once the moth was removed, she declared the machine debugged. The term stuck and is still used today. In 1949 she left Harvard to work for the Eckert-Mauchly Computer Corporation as a senior mathematician, joining the team that developed the UNIVAC 1 computer. She also was director of automatic programming development for Remington Rand. The UNIVAC was the first large-scale electronic computer introduced to the business world in 1950. While at Eckert-Mauchly, Hopper believed that programming should be simplified. Other computer companies used machine language-based programming. She believed that mathematics coupled with basic English command could be coded into a programming language. She designed a compiler that converted mathematical algebraic notation into machine code that would be understood by the computer. At first her concept was met with cynicism. But in 1952 she succeeded and had an operational compiler. The program was called the A compiler. She still believed that the use of symbols in the A compiler was fine for mathematicians, but not for data processors. By 1954 her department released Mathematic and Flowmatic, some of the first compiler-based programming languages. But she believed in her concept of an English-based programming language. As computer use increased, the need for a universal system became a priority. Then in the spring of 1959, government and industry experts were brought together for a two-day conference. Hopper served as a technical consultant at the Conference on Data Systems Languages. Her committee defined a new language called COBOL, based on her Flowmatic program along with Contran, an IBM equivalent, that used English syntax along with algebraic equations for programming. It was widely adopted by both industry and the government. The new language went on to become the most widely used, if not the industry standard, business language and still is today. As of 2000, 70% of all active code is COBOL code. In 1966, in accordance with naval regulations, at the age of 60, she retired from the Naval Reserve with the rank of Naval Commander. Only to be recalled in August of 1967 to active duty to aid the Navy, as director of the Navy Programming Languages Group, to develop software as part of a COBOL standardization program for the entire Navy. Again, she retired in 1971, and was asked to return to active duty in 1972. Then in 1973 she was promoted to captain by Admiral Elmo Zumwalt Jr. She continued her work with updating the standardization program, until her retirement in 1977. In 1983, after U.S. Representative Philip Crane saw her interviewed on a network news program, he rallied Congress to pass a joint resolution to promote her to the retired list, with the rank of Commodore, out of the Senate Armed Services Committee. But instead, President Reagan, using the appointment clause, promoted her to Commodore on December 15, 1983. She remained on active duty by special approval of Congress, and on November 8, 1985 she was promoted to Rear Admiral. She took her final retirement from the Navy on August 14, 1986. At that time, she was the oldest serving member of the Navy, and a celebration was held aboard the USS Constitution to commemorate her retirement, at which Hopper was awarded the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the highest non-combat decoration awarded by the Defense Department. After her retirement, she then took a position at the Digital Equipment Corporation as their principal corporation consulting engineer. She was the company representative at industry forums and served on various committees. She served as a goodwill ambassador for DEC, giving lectures about her career in the early days of computers. During these lectures she became known for her nanoseconds visual aids. She illustrated that a nanosecond was the maximum distance a signal would travel in a vacuum. But through wire it would travel more slowly as she held up an 11-inch piece of wire. Then she would hold up a coil of wire 984 feet long to represent a microsecond, to illustrate why computers needed to be small, in order to be fast. She continued to travel and lecture until her death in 1992. In 2016, President Obama posthumously awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our nation's highest civilian honor, in recognition of her contributions in the field of computer sciences.
Well, what I felt was that there were a large number of people in the country who did not like symbols. They were not mathematicians, and they hated symbols. So let them write their programs in English. It was common sense.